Hey, gamers, it's Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here for a quick video with Professor Joe Sramek. He is Associate Professor of History at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. How you doing, Joe?
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm really happy to talk to you. So it's been a couple weeks since we met, but we met at the Reacting to the Past Game Development Conference where you had a game that we were testing. So why don't you tell the people about your game?
Okay, so this is a game that's called Reform or Revolution, Britain in the 1840s, and it deals with a very turbulent period in British history, which, it's funny because ever since this period, we don't think of British history as being all that revolutionary. It's being kind of a calm country in terms of political turmoil and so on. But the 1840s were a period where you had high unemployment. You had a system of protective tariffs called the Corn Laws, which taxed the price of food. So food was very expensive. Factories were being just built during the Industrial Revolution a couple of decades earlier. The railway was just coming in. But, the majority of the population hadn't seen any of the material gains yet from the Industrial Revolution. So there was a lot of poverty. There was this very harsh poor law that was passed in the 1830s, which meant that if you wanted to get poor relief, you had to go and work in a workhouse. And a lot of this is written about by Charles Dickens and other writers. So we have a lot of us have a thumbnail sketch of this period. But then what happens is you get to the 1848, the very end of the decade, and in France there's a revolution. In Germany, there's a revolution. In Italy, there's a revolution. In Austria, there's a revolution. And all there is in Britain is a Chartist demonstration, which looks for time to be revolutionary. And the Queen Victoria is actually huddled out of London for her own personal safety that very weekend that the march happens. But then it doesn't actually there isn't a revolution in Britain. It fizzles out. So I've always been curious by why that is. And this is a long-standing question within the study of British history, is what made it possible for Britain to narrowly avoid what happens to the rest of Europe, even happens across the United States. I mean, Seneca Falls, the women's rights meeting in Seneca Falls is in 1848. So I mean, this is a year of revolutionary turmoil everywhere around the world. And in Britain, it doesn't seem to have much of an effect. So I was curious. I've always been very curious about that. And then I do a lot of work with students, particularly the last couple of years with Reacting to the Past. I've had a couple honor students want to write their own games. They play a couple reacting games with me, and then they want to create their own material. So I had so I've always been curious by this idea of the 1840s in British history and how to approach it when I teach British history in the classroom, or teach 19th century Europe in the classroom or whatever. And then I had these two students who came along in 2018, and they both were interested in various aspects of the same question. So the three of us then wrote a game, or started writing a game. That's really where the thing came from.
Oh, that's wild. So in a way, you had a hard play test because it was the last day. We were all wiped out. And it was also the only play test happening that morning. So there had to be enough roles to cover everybody. What kind of unique challenges does that present for you as somebody showing this game?
Well, it showed that my game needed a lot of further revision. And I had this inner sense going into the game that the game was very wonky. One of the things I love about the game development workshop of the Reacting to the Past Consortium is that you can bring your crap. They say bring your crap and we will help fix it. And it's in both, this is my second reacting game that I've written. I've written another one, which is called The Birth of the Public Sphere. And it's on late 17th century England coffee house and the burgeoning coffee house culture, London, in the very end of the 17th century, where you have the scientific revolution and you have political and moral debates and the Glorious Revolution of 1688. So that game I presented about 5 years ago to this very same conference, and it was very, it was a mess. And playtest was, just also on a Saturday, if I seem to remember. It seemed to always put me on a Saturday. And after that conference and some, further reflection, it now is a level 3 game, got revised to a point where it can be played by a lot of people, and I'm very excited about that. So I know this process works, and it's a great group of people that are very, scholar educators of the highest skill and highest level enthusiasm, and they want your game to work. They want to help you with it. So they're not there it's like you go to these academic conferences sometimes and people go to score points on you. That's not what this is at all. This is a very collaborative, friendly, but yet, we want to make sure the game actually is games are the best they can possibly be. So I had this inner sense about this. So let me back up. I was talking in about 2018 about how I had these 2 students that wanted to both write honors projects with me. One student was interested in the repeal of the porn laws in 1846, and this destroys Robert Peel's premiership. Sir Robert Peel is the prime minister in the 1840s. He is the greatest political figure of his era. Historians sometimes call this period the Age of Peel. He's the founder of the Metropolitan Police. So this is Bobby's, or the nickname for London policeman. Bobby is a reference to him because he founded the police. He, reformed the criminal law code. He did a lot of really interesting things, really important things. And he was at the top of his political game in the 1840s. And he ends up self-immolating as a political figure and is destroying his political career over repeal of the Corn Laws. He decides in the first fall of the Irish potato famine. It's not a famine yet. It doesn't, but the crop fails in 1845. Tries to keep the Irish fed the first year through soup kitchens and various other temporary measures. And he says, you know what? We can't have protective agricultural. We can't have tariffs on food. We got to make food cheap so people can eat. And he takes this back to his political party, and his political party, which represents a lot of rural areas, says hell no, and they make him pay the ultimate political price, which is he loses power over this issue. So he was interested in why that was and how that came to be, and he wanted to game about that. And I had a second student that wanted to know why there was no revolution in Britain in 1848, despite what Karl Marx writes in Communist Manifesto, that this is a prime place to have a revolution. What Friedrich Engels writes in, his book about Manchester and poverty in 1845, I think it is. He publishes his book. And that's how the two meet, actually, Engels and Marx. They meet in England in the late 1840s. We wanted to know why this place never has a revolution. Why wasn't it? So I said, these two things can actually work together as one game. But what happened was, so we played a couple times in my classroom. I had these really eager students who want to help me. They don't want to show me up. They adore reacting. They don't want to be. And so I didn't see the issues with the game design until I took it to GDC. The issues with the game design are you have activists, and I think you were playing an activist, were you not?
Yes, yeah, I was Joseph Fletcher.
Okay, so you have activists who have these variety of very principled positions. Either you're utilitarian in your case, or you're a chartist, or you're a anti-Cornwall leaguer, or you're a temperance advocate, or you're whatever it is. And then you have the politicians. And the way the game used to be, because I'm in the middle of radically dividing it into two games now. The way the game used to be was you had the politicians do their House of Commons thing for about a half hour. And then you would have the activists go up and give stump speeches around the country. And then the politicians had to somehow respond to that. I didn't see that happen that weekend. Maybe it was because everybody was tired or it was the flaw in the game design. And so what I noticed with the weekend was the politicians got what they needed to do really quickly. And it actually clicked right away for the 12 or so characters that were playing politicians. But 20 of you that were playing everybody else, it was a little harder, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was hard to feel like the politicians were listening to me. or it was almost like everybody wanted so many different things that we couldn't like form effective alliances. That might have been a time thing too. I mean, we hadn't bonded as a class, so to speak.
Right.
Nobody, I mean, we all did all the background reading, of course.
Of
We were
course.
very
Yes.
yes.
Yes. And faculty can phone it in like the best of, like people with PhDs can phone in like the best of us. Because you have
Yes.
to, yeah. Yeah, so some of that was going on, but there was something else going on, which was, was very interesting when you play so many games in the classroom over as I have. I think I've played something like 50 games at this point over my career. In my classroom, you get a real inner sense when something's not working. And within about 10 minutes or 15 minutes of the gameplay that weekend, I knew it wasn't working. Because I was walking down to your end of the table and I can just feel the confusion. And it wasn't you, it was 20 of you that were all saying the same thing. What am I supposed to do when it comes to the public comment period? How am I supposed to mobilize? Now, part of what you were feeling also, that the politicians aren't really listening to you, where you feel that there's so many other contending voices. I want that feel to be still there somehow.
Yes.
Because that was, I think, the 1840s, and I actually think that's politics now. I mean, we're not as polarized a country as our politicians make it out to be. Like they're in their own little bubble sometimes.
Yes, but also everybody's got a pet issue, and if you wanted to become an activist and get involved.
That's exactly right, and that was what was happening in the 1840s as well. Is everybody had a pet issue, and they couldn't get along with each other. It's wild they can't get along with each other. Two Chartist leaders, Edward Fergus O'Connor and William Lovett, in 1841 can't speak to one another. They have decided they're not on speaking terms anymore. And they go, and William Lovett actually he's the co-author of the charter only 4 years earlier. He actually leaves the Chartist organization and says, "To hell with this, I'm forming my own group." That's how wild it is. And then the
utilitarians are broken up too.
And they've broken up too. And everybody breaks up. And so I'm sort of like, if they could only get on the same page, what would Britain look like? What would the world look like? It's very interesting in a way that because there's all the factionalizing going on among the various types of reform.
Yes.
So I wanted some of that in the game, but I didn't. But what I realized was you can't have too much. It's got to be productive chaos. Got to be a level of productive chaos. So since the conference, I've been really motivated to divide this game into two. I'm working on the idea that this is now 2 games, possibly even 3. I'm working on this idea also that there are modules. So instructors can choose which module they want. So the module that I'm working on right now, this past week, is a debating society.
Ooh.
And so you have your activists. You don't have politicians. The only time politicians would go to the debating society is if they're also activists. So Lord Ashley wants a factory reform legislation. He's the factory reform paternalist in the room. So he goes to the debating society because he's off hours and he wants to hear, talk, mingle with the people. But otherwise, it's Fletcher gets to talk about his work on the Royal Commission of handloom weavers, and he gets to talk about his work about education. And so Chadwick gets to talk about public health all he wants. And so I'm putting this game together right now where the 3 factions, which are paternalists, utilitarians, and anti-corn law leaguers, plus a coterie of democratic radicals who aren't a faction, because we're not a faction, because we're democratic radicals, and we don't like each other.
Obviously.
But that's your Fergus O'Connor, and that's your William Lovett, and that's a couple of the other people that are going to. And so I'm putting them in a debating society, and it's got very, very simple rules. I found a debating society that still exists to this day. It was from the 18th century on. So I'm basically called a society of codgers. It takes its name from Descartes. He has this, I think therefore I am. You will pronounce the Latin better than I will, so I won't. Cogito,
Cogito ergo sum.
ergo sum. Yeah, so they take cogere from cogito. And so they've existed since the 1750s continuously. And they have very elegant rules, which makes the game probably a breeze to run in any classroom, which is why I'm happy, because I struggle as a game designer with not knowing how many mechanisms. I dump every mechanism I can think of into a game, and then I don't know when to stop. And I usually have to have somebody tell me stop, like Jonathan Truitt did that weekend. It's like, you have too many mechanisms by far. Get rid of them. Because I want my mechanisms.
But like at the same time, I think it's a good thing to know about yourself. I think one of my favorite things about going to this particular game development conference is, so I'm a game reviewer, is my sort of like, side thing that I do other than be a teacher. And people are very precious about their games. Not all. Some people love criticism and love playtests, and others really, really struggle. And I thought the whole attitude of the GDC was great, because it was about, okay, here's what I got. Let's make it really, really good. And everybody was together on
And
that.
then you have to shut up. And then you have to shut up at 11:45 or 12 o'clock. You have to shut up. So you play a game for 3 hours. Now, I am a New Yorker, a talkative New Yorker from a talkative family where, my mother's the eldest of 9 children. So I have 17 first cousins. So in order to get your word in, a family, Thanksgivings, you had to like just elbow your way into the conversation. So I'm just used to talking nonstop, and I do it for a living, as a professor. And I have a reputation around the reacting community is, will he be able to shut up on Saturday? People all weekend were, no, on Saturday, you're not going to be allowed to, rebut and have a follow-up. It helped that the room was angled in such a way than where I was sitting that I couldn't actually see anybody. I literally forced myself to be quiet, to listen to it, because there were 32 other people in the room that had to give me feedback. And I think that's great, that you need to shut up at that point and let them tell you what they thought of the game. Now, granted, they're playing a very condensed version. A game that is designed to be 3 or 4 weeks long is being played in 2 hours at most, 3 hours. High on the fizz, because people ham it up. The substance, as you said, we all did the reading. I swear we all did a reading, but yeah. But no, it's great. It's great because you get to give honest feedback, but it's a circle of trust. And this is something that's really important. When you think about LARPing, right? You need to have the safety mechanisms. And one of the safety mechanisms with game design is that it's a circle of trust. We can be super critical, and we can be, this sucks. We need to be better. But we all realize it's coming from a place of support. It's coming from a place of, we want this to be, we believe in this game. We're not trying to score points on you. I go to these that's not true with a lot of the professional conferences I go to. I don't feel that that's a circle of trust all the time. This is why I decided to spend a lot more time on this now in this phase of my academic career than some of those other forms of academia.
Makes sense. And it also sounds like so much good is coming from it. I'm actually really excited to see like what game or games will emerge from the playtest, because I think that is very exciting.
Well, I think what I've decided to do, and of course we'll see what happens in a few months when the next when things are in a state where where I can say there are games at this point. Right now I'm just revising. I've decided that the one game is a debating society, as I pointed out, where you have the different philosophical thought of that time period. Talking about how you would solve certain policy problems, but from first principles. So I see this as a game, either as a warm-up game, where you first have to go really deeply dive into the text before you can do anything else. Or I see this as a standalone game for high school instructors or even college instructors who teach Western Civ or European and world history, who need a week-long unit on utilitarianism, free trade, early socialism, paternalist ideas, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have now your competing ideologies of that time period, which are really foundational in the making of the modern world ever since. You can now debate those in a classroom setting, maybe for a week or week and a half. And this is probably ready to order for a lot of people who don't have any more time than that to have these discussions in the class. I then see another game, which I'm going to use as the second game, and I'm going to put these two games in order. And first, I'm going to start with first principles. What are the ideological states? The second game is a Parliament game, like you saw that weekend, but it's only Parliament now. So you have a utilitarian in the game, but he's a member of Parliament who's sympathetic to utilitarian ideas. So now you've got the basic first principles. You're arguing from first principles. What are these ideologies? And you understand, and you've read, you've gone deeply into reading for maybe a week or two, and I've incentivized that in the game design. Now you can go and tweak so your heart's content about what kind of policy you're going to do, what kind of law you're going to pass, and all the political gamemanship stuff. So I think that's how it's in my head at the moment, is that that you can either or could work by themselves, but the way I want to kind of teach it is in my own classroom, and I have the luxury this fall of having as much time as I need for this, because I'm teaching a class on 19th century Britain, so it's perfect.
Awesome.
And so I could see this working as a two-punch. And then you really come away to takeaways, you come away knowing what utilitarianism is, knowing what these ideologies are, also knowing a lot about what happened in the 1840s from a policy and political history point of view and social history point of view, and then coming out, and then that stays with you. Because that's takeaway with gamification in higher education, and reacting fast is only a type of gamification, is that it just works. People remember, they know the materials, it sticks with them because they have an emotional response to it. And I think that's really where the secret is. It's because you're playing a game, and because you're playing a historical character, you're emotionally invested. And therefore, it's not some rambling on about dates and facts and abstract things. It's got something visceral about it. People will remember what dirty thing that was done to them years later by somebody else in a reacting game.
That's actually the perfect place to stop, I think, because it really sums up how important gaming in the classroom really can be. But for people who have questions for you, where can you be found on the internet?
Okay, I don't have a handle on Twitter because I think in terms of paragraphs. My head does not do little sense. I'm always like this. So I haven't been on there. I'm also not. I have a very basic LinkedIn profile, but the best way to find me is actually by email at sramek.siu.edu, or to go on the Department of History website for Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, and you'll find me there as well.
Fantastic. And those of you here watching probably know at this point, you can find me anywhere as Beyond Solitaire. Thank you so much for coming on, Joe. This is a great conversation, and I can't wait to see what happens next.
Right. Yay.
All right. All right, all y'all out there, please like, subscribe, comment, ask questions, and most of all, happy gaming.